Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about something I've spoken about a few times before, declining social trust in the West. And I'm probably as well placed as anybody to observe this. When I first started doing business traveling years ago now, I was quite taken aback by how low the social trust was in most countries that I visited, particularly ones that were outside of the richer Western nations. Now, there was even a degree of variance in the Western nations in terms of social trust, which, by the way, feeds directly into things like business trust and commercial trust and the ability of people to cooperate and to collaborate and these sorts of things. These are severely affected when social trust is reduced. So where social trust is low in any sort of agreement or collaboration, the lower trust party effectively wants an ironclad guaranteed outcome in their favour. Otherwise, they just won't do anything. Whereas in a high trust society, there's an acceptance you're going to collaborate to create wealth that will be some way off down the track. And you're going to do a lot of hard work today in order to build that wealth, or the engine room for creating that wealth. And that's accepted because your collaboration, your trust in each other is such that you take it for granted that the other party will behave honourably and with due deference to the welfare of the community and the group or the collaborators in this case. Now, that sort of high levels of social trust, you just don't see it outside of the West. And again, even different ones in the West. For example, social trust in England was quite high because England hasn't been invaded for 1,000 years or so. They've had incredible continuity of institutions and social continuity and so on. There's some class distrust there, no question, but there's a general belief that the upper classes identify their own interests with that of the people, give or take, some degrees either way, but effectively they all believe they're English and they're all in it together. And there's thus a high degree of trust and faith in the various people and groups around England or parts of Britain generally, but England in this instance. Again, a lot of that due to the continuity of their institutions and so on. Now, looking at other Western countries, there was a relative divide between in some cases classes or different regions and that sort of thing. There was some looking down upon the working classes. The French elites, for example, were very contemptuous of the hoi polloi and didn't necessarily see they were in it together at all, which I assume is some sort of hangover from the brazen sort of aristocratic days of 200 years previously. But going to the third world or outside of that first world group, there was a galaxies apart in social trust, and there was simply an inability of people to collaborate to get anything done. They just couldn't do it. The trust level was so low. There was always the view that the other guy was trying to rip you off and so on. Some of this is tribal and over the centuries, trust is in Africa, for example. The tribes have been at not only a state of war, but a state of ambushing one another and taking slaves and all sorts of things like that. There isn't the formal thing like in Western Europe where they would declare war and they'd line the armies up on the field and so on. It's not like that. There are constant little petty raids and kidnappings and all sorts of things going on all the time. So the level of trust between tribes, even among tribes, like within the tribe, the level of trust is very, very low. And they've got, again, a view that most third world people have, that the world only has a set amount of wealth. So the only way you can get more of it is if you take someone else's. So by extension, you assume that's what they're trying to do, to take your wealth. So they've got no idea of collaborating to create more, because the social trust just isn't there. And this is all over the place. Even China, India, all over Africa, much of the Middle East, and South America. Again, the social trust is just rock bottom. So it's much harder to get things done there. Not so much with the with the elites. They've all been educated in the West and that sort of thing. It's a little bit easier there, but not a whole lot. The South American elites are a bit more trustworthy than, for example, the Indian or Chinese elites are. So there's even differences within that. But I wanted to just talk about, so when any society has an inability to collaborate, to create something that isn't material, isn't material right in front of you now. It's not the gold nugget you dig out of the ground now that's right there. It's something you have to collaborate to create this wealth. Now, there's also issues, say, within the United States, where people that know each other from high school or through university and so on. If you look at a lot of the, not all, but a lot of the Silicon Valley stuff, where the collaborators on creating some new technology or new computer or new software or anything like that, they were people that knew each other, if not from university, even earlier than that, senior high school and so on. And so they had a lot of trust for each other, a lot of faith in each other, a lot of belief that, hey, we're in this together. This guy's not going to screw me, and so on. And a lot of it came from that. Not all, and there was a lot that was done outside of that, but that certainly was a major factor. That degree of trust that they may not have trusted an outsider to the same extent. Now, I trawled through Silicon Valley, as a punk kid in the mid '80s, or even a bit earlier than that, and this is. My employer sent me there to sort of do the big assessment on Silicon Valley technology and suss the technology of the future and where it was going. And so I was running around like San Jose and all around that Silicon Valley area, just knocking on doors of these little cubicles, little sort of light industrial area, these little cubicles where people were in there inventing the technological future, and I came across a number of ones that were later on to become big players in the IT, international information technology game. And I mean, some of them were literally startups. I remember sitting on the floor talking to them because their furniture hadn't arrived yet, and this sort of thing. Well, they had one chair in the whole place. And it was very, very exciting times. A lot of these people weren't really much older than me, but they had there'd be 3 programmers, 3 or 4 designers, that sort of thing, and they had a lot of trust in each other. Even some of them were hiring people that they'd never met before, never knew before. And I did come across a lot of that, by the way. And that also is the one key indicator of a high trust society, that you can get together and collaborate with, or hire somebody, or whatever. Somebody who you've never met before, you don't know anything, you don't know a thing about them, other than you've met them and talked to them. So that ability of people who don't know each other, who may come from different classes, even different parts of the country, or different schools, different towns, different cities, they can still share a vision and collaborate and get together to produce, in this case, of course, new technology. Now, this is critical to creating a wealthy society. Without this, you do not have a wealthy society. This ability to collaborate with people you don't know and to have the high trust that's required to do that. Now, that's something sort of I picked up from that era. So I learned, or at least I think I learned during that time, that if you're going to collaborate to make wealth, you must extend a certain amount of trust to people. You must assume their intentions are good, and until they prove otherwise through their misbehavior, of course, but assume their intentions are good, because that will allow you to put your energies into the collaboration. Now, if you put your energies into suspicion and doubt and uncertainty and holding back and refusing to commit, or paranoia, or why should I put any more work into this? Because, how do I know they're not taking advantage of me? Those sorts of things. That's when the game's over. You're just not going to create the sort of wealth you could otherwise. And the faith in knowing that when the owner of the company or the boss or the managing director, the CEO or somebody says, okay, Billy Bob, we're going to give you, stock options worth X, this sort of thing, that you can rely on them to, that will be carried through. It is going to be reliable and dependable. You don't have to worry about, are they going to screw you or take away your stock options, or fire you the day before the stock options mature, or so, those sorts of things. So you have to have, it takes a lot of faith to have that, and that faith comes from faith in each other. That faith comes from social trust. Now, again, outside of the West, I didn't see that social trust. It just pretty much didn't exist. You'd find some very small pockets of it, but only in the multinational companies where the people had spent a long time in the West. Some of the local people, Asians or whatever, had spent a long time in the West, being educated, working there, and that sort of thing. And they'd understood the difference. Now, even in places like like Japan, where they had quite a lot of trust in each other, but and trust in their culture, and a belief in their collaboration would lead to success. Even their trust was limited outside of that. If they didn't understand or couldn't identify the social signals that they could amongst themselves, they would reflect that with their diminished level of trust, which is not that's not an outrageous thing, but it shows that trust has its, and faith and capacity to collaborate does have its limits. But the Japanese did very well in exporting and so on, in areas not just in IT, but in, as we all know, in motor vehicles and so on. Now, because the every poor country that I went to, that often had rich elites, by the way, but in every poor country I went to, the social trust was zero. It was I was surprised that any society could function with such low social trust. There were little microcosms of social trust, such as just the people within a village, because they'd lived in that village for centuries and they all knew their, the multiple generations. There was a certain amount of trust there, but not much. There would be more trust with people in the West that didn't know each other, but had faith and trust in one another to collaborate. There'd still be more trust there than there was in some peasant village, which I found was rather surprising. I witnessed a community hall being built in a remote, well, not that remote, but a remote Indonesian village, and just the lack of social trust there. If we can't see what you're doing, and we can't see your hands, you have to prove to us you're not going to screw us. And again, this thing about there's only a fixed amount of wealth. Now I compare, say, the West today to what it was like back then, and the amount of trust today is social trust today, and the ability to collaborate has declined in social and commercial terms, but has increased in strict ideological terms, as in opposing something. So we've got an incredible situation now in the West where the younger people in particular, through the NGOs and the radicalisation through the education department, they're happy to go out and wave placards and spend all day on the street protesting, climate change or whatever the buzz of the moment is. They're more than happy to do that and get all excited about it. And, I'm fighting back against the Nazis, but they're not prepared to go and vote. They're not prepared to volunteer for something that's worthwhile, like I don't know, giving meals to the homeless, or so, these sorts of things. Something that has in my view, has greater immediate and general wider social value. Also, they won't volunteer for things like I don't know, sports events or other things like that that rely quite heavily on volunteers. In fact, without volunteers, some of these things couldn't happen. Um, and there's everything from, I don't know, bowling to martial arts tournaments, to a lot of track and field events, all sorts of things, like that. And unless there's really big money there, like big league football or something. But aside from that, volunteers are absolutely critical. These things couldn't happen. But the same people that are waving placards about climate change are refusing to volunteer for other things. So they won't vote, they won't volunteer to assist any or engage in any community work. But yet they'll spend all day waving placards. Now, that's created a schism or a split in what would be the social trust deposits, depositing, if you like, wealth in the social trust bank. This is something where they're now opposed to the society, but are refusing to, that's demonstrated by their placard waving about climate change or whatever. But they're not able to contribute to society in other ways. they want and I've sat at lunches or dinners or whatever where I'll get jawboned about how meat is bad, and this is by people that are getting stuck into steaks and pork sausages and lamb chops, lecturing about how everyone else should change their diet but not them. So coming on to the mass migration thing now, this has a big effect on how people are affected, I should say. So a gated community can be an actual sort of iron gates, but can also be a community that's affected by, say, the entry level to get into such a community. If you've got to pay $3 million to buy a house there, you've already cut out 98% of the population is already unable to go there. So straight away you cut out all these so-called refugees and illegals and the mass migrants and the third world shitholes and everything. You've already cut them out. Now, if on top of that you don't have any apartment buildings or any low rent housing, or the rents are fucking $3,000 a week or something like that, then again you've cut out those people. So those people don't have to become involved in. They don't have to have anything to do with these people, the migrants and so on. So they can say, well, these people aren't anywhere near me. I don't want them anywhere near me. But they're not there anyway, nor can they appear in that neighbourhood. So the trust is based on the social trust, to whatever extent exists, is saying, well, these people they aren't in my neighbourhood. They're in some other neighbourhood that's gone to shit. So I don't have to care about them, I have to worry about them. So I still support mass migration. Unlike, say, the white people in the poorer areas that are directly affected by, seriously affected by, no one speaks English in the neighbourhood anymore. The shops are all taken over by people that don't speak English. All the street signs are suddenly not in English and this sort of stuff. That is a big effect on your neighbourhood. You're going to the schools where your kid is now a minority in a school that's full of black and brown people who have very different habits and attitudes, and a huge sense of entitlement, and some of them are quite brutish and hang around in gangs and this sort of thing. So this is also a change in the very concept of how trust is arrived at, and how it's conceived in not only a social sense, but a community participation sense, and how you can divide or keep the problem away from you, provided it's not in your face every day. For example, I live in a neighbourhood that's 98% white. which, by the way, has been slated as being tantamount. I mean, what a hive of fucking Nazis. Look, 98% white. What a problem that is. We got to fix that. That's a damn problem. Because 98% white, that means they're fucking Nazis. But even the people in the neighborhood, because we don't, we don't have none of the people are really have any experience or knowledge or have encountered diversity, as in the mass migration type diversity that other people have in other areas. So that, oh no, there's nothing wrong with mass migration. Who cares? Because it hasn't negatively impacted them, then they kind of see it as a non-issue, and they've bought into the line to some extent that the people who disagree with it must be Nazis. But then we come to the point where you now just trust your neighbours. Is your neighbour a Nazi? Are they Hitler worshippers? That sort of thing. And so there's now been another division in trust between white people of the morally virtuous and the non-morally virtuous, which has caused a further decline in trust now. Who wants to live next door to or employ or work alongside a Nazi? Because Nazis are everywhere. I mean, seriously, under every bed, in every closet, around every corner, there are Nazis. And this propaganda has really been, as a lot of the propaganda is now in support of the globalist project, is created social division amongst people where there should be no social division. There should be no lack of trust. So you've now got this ideological thing where it's not just that people from other cultures or people who behave differently or people that are paranoid. It's not that anymore. Or there's that's a big thing. But the issue also on top of that is that the white community doesn't trust each other on the basis of who might or could be a Nazi, and this has been certainly pushed by our elected representatives. All globalists controlled, of course, by our mass media and by our institutions. So our institutions and media have turned us against each other. Whether it be through race, gender, ideology, who's the Nazi and all this sort of thing, and that too. So the end result is the diminished and lost social, commercial, and collaborative trust. And my sort of position here is that if there is any gains at all, and I don't believe there are, if there are any gains at all from bringing out masses of illiterate brown and black peasants to the West, as distinct from highly qualified people that may contribute to the community and the economy. So bringing out masses of these peasants, most of whom are on unemployment payments 10 years down the track, that bringing those people out has created a diminishing, has actually reduced, I think, the economic vibrance of the, and certainly the economic efficiency of the Western nations. But in addition to that, the loss of the social, commercial, collaborative trust means that thousands upon thousands of businesses that otherwise would be starting, the new wealth that be created is now not being created because there's lack of ability to collaborate. And I see it now amongst white people. Not going to release a new range of products, or he's not going to sign off on the R&D to create a new range of products. We've got an R&D director and I don't know him. I don't know who he is. I don't know him well, so I'm not going to do it. What do you mean you're not going to do it because you don't know him? What, you didn't go to fucking primary school with him? You're not going to, what is this? But it demonstrates, and I'm seeing many examples of that, it demonstrates a breakdown of that collaborative level of trust, which is an extension from, social trust. And that really is what the root, I believe, is what is absolutely crippling the capacity of the West to create new wealth. You've been Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.